There are two types of people in this world: those who force themselves and those who make excuses for why they can't. The excuse makers will tell you about their difficult childhood, their lack of resources, their bad timing, their unsupportive family, their unfair circumstances. They have a PhD in victimhood and a master's degree in justification. But the people who force themselves don't waste time explaining why they can't succeed. They invest time creating ways to succeed anyway. They understand that life is not fair. Circumstances are not perfect. And nobody is coming to rescue them. They have accepted that forcing yourself is not optional if you want to live at a level above survival. Your excuses are not protecting you from failure. They are guaranteeing it. Every night at exactly 11 p.m., while the corporate towers of downtown fell silent and the streets emptied of their daytime energy, Maria Rodriguez would pull out a worn copy of constitutional law from her janitor's cart. She would position it carefully next to her cleaning supplies, open to whatever page she had left off the night before, and begin to read under the harsh fluorescent lights of the law firm where she mopped floors for minimum wage. The lawyers who worked there during the day had no idea that their cleaning lady was studying the same cases they argued in court. They had no idea that while they slept in their comfortable beds, Maria was forcing herself through page after page of legal precedents, constitutional amendments, and case studies that made her eyes burn and her head pound. But Maria understood something that most people never grasp. She understood that nobody was coming to rescue her. No fairy godmother was going to wave a magic wand and transform her life from poverty to purpose. No lottery ticket was going to fall from the sky. No rich relative was going to die and leave her a fortune. The only person who could change Maria's life was Maria herself. And she was going to have to force herself to do it, you see. Maria had made a decision that separated her from the millions of people who dream but never achieve. She had decided that her current reality was unacceptable, and she was going to force herself out of it regardless of how painful, how difficult, or how impossible it seemed. She didn't wait until she felt motivated. She didn't wait until she had more time. She didn't wait until her circumstances improved. She forced herself to act in spite of her circumstances. This is what I want you to understand today. There is a fundamental difference between wanting to change your life and forcing yourself to change your life. Wanting is passive. Wanting is comfortable. Wanting allows you to dream without doing. Wanting lets you imagine a better future while remaining safely trapped in your current reality. But forcing yourself, that's active. That's uncomfortable. That's dangerous to your current way of living because it demands that you become someone you've never been before. Most people live their entire lives in the gap between wanting and forcing. They want to lose weight, but they don't force themselves to exercise when they don't feel like it. They want to build a business, but they don't force themselves to make the phone calls that terrify them. They want to write a book, but they don't force themselves to sit down and write when inspiration doesn't strike. They want to learn new skills, but they don't force themselves to study when they're tired after work. The problem is that your comfort zone is not just a place, it's a graveyard. It's where dreams go to die. It's where potential gets buried under the weight of routine and familiarity. Your comfort zone is designed to keep you exactly where you are, and it will fight you with everything it has to prevent you from leaving. It will whisper to you that you're not ready yet. It will convince you that you need more preparation, more resources, more time. It will flood your mind with every possible reason why you should wait until tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. But here's what Maria discovered during those late nights in that empty office building. The voice in your head that tells you to wait, that tells you you're not ready, that tells you to be reasonable and practical, that voice is not your friend. That voice is the enemy of your potential. That voice represents every limitation that has ever been placed on you by society, by your family, by your past failures, by your fears. And the only way to silence that voice is to force yourself to act in spite of it. When Maria first decided she wanted to become a lawyer, that voice was loud. It reminded her that she was a high school dropout from the wrong side of town. It told her that law school was for rich kids with connections. It whispered that she was too old, too poor, too uneducated to ever make it in the legal profession. But Maria had reached a point in her life where she was more afraid of staying where she was than she was of attempting something that seemed impossible. You have to understand that there comes a moment in every person's life when they must choose between the pain of discipline and the pain of regret. The pain of discipline weighs ounces, but the pain of regret weighs tons. Maria chose the pain of discipline. She chose to force herself through the discomfort of studying after exhausting 12-hour shifts. She chose to force herself to save money for law school applications instead of buying things she wanted. She chose to force herself to believe in a future that nobody else could see. And that's exactly what you must do. You must force yourself beyond your current limitations. You must force yourself to take action when you don't feel like it. You must force yourself to persist when everyone around you thinks you're crazy. You must force yourself to grow into the person your dreams require you to become. The life you want is not going to create itself. The opportunities you need are not going to knock on your door. The skills you require are not going to download into your brain while you sleep. Everything you want exists on the other side of forcing yourself to do what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it, for as long as it takes to get there. Maria Rodriguez forced herself through 4 years of night school while working full-time. She forced herself through the LSAT preparation. She forced herself through law school applications and rejections. She forced herself through 3 years of law school, studying in break rooms and bathroom stalls when necessary, and today she practices law in the same building where she once mopped floors. But now she occupies a corner office on the 15th floor instead of the supply closet in the basement. The question is not whether you have the ability to transform your life. The question is whether you have the courage to force yourself to do what needs to be done. Now let me tell you what it really means to force yourself, because most people think they understand this concept, but they're operating with a counterfeit definition that keeps them trapped in cycles of temporary motivation followed by permanent mediocrity. Your mind is not designed for greatness. I need you to hear this clearly. Your brain is designed for survival, not success. It's designed to keep you alive, not to make you thrive. It's designed to conserve energy, avoid risk, and maintain the status quo. This is why every time you try to do something that requires you to stretch beyond your current capacity, your mind floods you with resistance, doubt, and every reasonable excuse to quit. This resistance is not a character flaw. It's not weakness. It's biology. Your brain's primary job is to keep you safe, and safe means familiar. Safe means predictable. Safe means staying exactly where you are, doing exactly what you've always done, being exactly who you've always been. But greatness lives in the unfamiliar. Excellence exists in the unpredictable. Your destiny is waiting for you to become someone you've never been before. Let me tell you about Thomas Mitchell. At 45 years old, Thomas was working in a factory, assembling car parts on a production line. He had been there for 22 years, and every day felt exactly like the one before. But Thomas had a secret. In his garage, covered with dust and disappointment, sat a guitar he hadn't touched in 15 years. He used to dream of being a musician, but life had gotten in the way. Marriage, children, bills, responsibilities had all combined to bury his musical aspirations under a mountain of practical concerns. One evening, after another soul-crushing day at the factory, Thomas made a decision that would change everything. He decided to force himself to practice guitar for 1 hour every single day, no matter what. Not when he felt inspired, not when he had extra time, not when circumstances were perfect. Every single day, without exception, for 1 hour. The first week was torture. His fingers had lost their calluses. His muscle memory was gone. The songs that once flowed effortlessly now sounded like noise. His wife thought he was having a midlife crisis. His friends told him he was too old to chase childish dreams. His own mind told him he was wasting time that could be spent on more practical pursuits. But Thomas understood something profound about the nature of forcing yourself. He understood that you don't force yourself once and then coast. You don't have one moment of discipline and then rely on momentum to carry you forward. Forcing yourself is not an event. It's a lifestyle. It's a daily decision to override your natural inclinations and do what your future self needs you to do today. Thomas forced himself to practice when his fingers bled. He forced himself to practice when he was exhausted from work. He forced himself to practice when his family complained about the noise. He forced himself to practice when he made mistakes that frustrated him to tears. He forced himself to practice when progress seemed impossible and talent seemed absent. What Thomas discovered is that forcing yourself creates what psychologists call neuroplasticity. Every time you force yourself to do something difficult, you're literally rewiring your brain. You're creating new neural pathways. You're building mental muscles that didn't exist before. You're expanding your capacity to handle discomfort, uncertainty, and challenge. After 6 months of forced daily practice, something began to shift. The songs started sounding like music again. His fingers regained their dexterity. His confidence started returning. After 1 year, he was writing original compositions. After 2 years, he was performing at local venues on weekends. After 3 years, he had quit the factory and was making a living as a full-time musician. But here's the crucial point that most people miss. Thomas didn't succeed because he found his passion. He didn't succeed because he discovered his natural talent. He didn't succeed because circumstances aligned in his favor. Thomas succeeded because he forced himself to practice consistently, regardless of how he felt, regardless of external circumstances, regardless of other people's opinions. This is the anatomy of self-force. It's not about waiting for motivation. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes like the weather. It's strong when you don't need it and absent when you do. Self-force is about creating systems and standards that operate independently of your emotional state. When you force yourself consistently, you develop what I call disciplined momentum. This is different from regular momentum because it doesn't depend on external circumstances or internal feelings. Disciplined momentum is self-generating. It feeds on itself. The more you practice forcing yourself, the easier it becomes to force yourself. Most people are waiting for motivation to strike before they take action. But successful people have learned to generate action that creates motivation. They force themselves to begin. And beginning creates momentum. And momentum generates motivation. They've reversed the equation that keeps most people stuck. But let me warn you about something. The moment you decide to force yourself toward greatness, you will encounter enemies. Not the enemies you expect from the outside world, but enemies that live inside your own mind. These internal saboteurs are more dangerous than any external opposition because they know exactly how to speak to you. They know your weaknesses, your fears, your past failures. They know precisely what buttons to push to make you quit. The first enemy is fear. Fear will tell you that you're not qualified for the dreams you're chasing. Fear will remind you of every time you failed before. Fear will paint vivid pictures of all the things that could go wrong if you step outside your comfort zone. Fear is not trying to protect you from real danger. Fear is trying to protect you from growth. Because growth requires you to become someone you've never been before, and that terrifies the part of your mind that wants to keep you safely trapped in familiarity. The second enemy is procrastination. Procrastination is not about poor time management. Procrastination is about fear wearing a disguise. When you procrastinate, you're not being lazy. You're avoiding the emotional discomfort that comes with doing something difficult or unfamiliar. Procrastination tells you that you'll do it tomorrow when you feel more ready, when you have more time, when circumstances are better. But tomorrow never comes because the discomfort will still be there waiting for you. The third enemy is perfectionism. Perfectionism convinces you that if you can't do something perfectly, you shouldn't do it at all. Perfectionism keeps you trapped in preparation mode, always getting ready to get ready, but never actually starting. Perfectionism tells you that your work isn't good enough, that you need more training, more resources, more time before you can begin. Elena Vasquez understood these enemies intimately. When she decided to start her own catering business, she had no formal culinary training, no business experience, and only $300 in her savings account. Fear told her she would fail and lose her money. Procrastination told her to wait until she had more capital and experience. Perfectionism told her she needed to perfect her recipes and business plan before approaching any customers. But Elena made a decision that changed everything. She decided to force herself through the fear, through the procrastination, through the perfectionism. She forced herself to make her first sales call even though her hands were shaking. She forced herself to cater her first event even though she was terrified of making mistakes. She forced herself to approach potential clients even though she had been rejected 46 times in a row. On her 47th attempt, she got her first yes. A small office wanted her to cater their monthly staff meeting. It wasn't glamorous. The profit was minimal, but it was a beginning. Elena forced herself to treat that small catering job like it was the most important event she would ever handle. She forced herself to exceed their expectations. She forced herself to ask for referrals. She forced herself to follow up with thank you notes. That one small yes led to another yes, which led to another yes within 2 years. Elena was catering corporate events for major companies. Within 5 years, she owned 3 restaurants. But none of that would have happened if she had listened to the enemies within. None of that would have happened if she had waited for fear to disappear, for procrastination to stop whispering, for perfectionism to give her permission to begin. The enemies within are powerful, but they're not invincible. They can be defeated, but only through the consistent application of force. You must force yourself to act in spite of fear. You must force yourself to begin in spite of procrastination. You must force yourself to progress in spite of perfectionism. Now let me show you exactly how to force yourself into the life you are born to live. This is not theory. This is not philosophy. This is the practical mechanics of personal transformation that works whether you feel like it or not. First, you must create what I call non-negotiable standards. These are behaviors that you will perform regardless of circumstances, regardless of feelings, regardless of external pressures. Maria had a non-negotiable standard of studying law every night after work. Thomas had a non-negotiable standard of practicing guitar for 1 hour daily. Elena had a non-negotiable standard of making sales calls despite rejection. Your non-negotiable standards become the foundation of your new identity. Every time you honor these standards, you're proving to yourself that you are the type of person who keeps their commitments. Every time you break these standards, you're reinforcing the old identity that keeps you trapped in mediocrity. Second, you must design your environment for success. Your environment is stronger than your willpower. If you're trying to force yourself to eat healthy while your kitchen is full of junk food, you're fighting a losing battle. If you're trying to force yourself to exercise while your gym clothes are buried in a closet, you're making success unnecessarily difficult. Maria kept her law books in her janitor's cart so they were always available. Thomas kept his guitar in his living room where he couldn't avoid seeing it. Elena kept her client contact list on her desk where it reminded her daily to make calls. They understood that forcing yourself becomes easier when your environment supports your goals instead of sabotaging them. Third, you must understand the compound effect of forced daily actions. Small actions performed consistently over time create massive results. Most people overestimate what they can accomplish in a day and underestimate what they can accomplish in a year. They try to change everything at once and end up changing nothing permanently. But when you force yourself to take one small action every single day, without exception, for an extended period of time, something magical happens. That small action compounds on itself. It builds momentum. It creates habits. It transforms your identity. It rewrites your story. Thomas didn't become a professional musician because he had one great practice session. He became a professional musician because he had 1,000 ordinary practice sessions. Elena didn't build a successful business because she made one perfect sales call. She built a successful business because she made hundreds of imperfect sales calls. Fourth, you must force yourself beyond your current identity. Your identity is not fixed. You are not stuck being who you've always been. But changing your identity requires you to consistently act like the person you want to become, even when it feels unnatural, even when it feels like you're pretending. If you want to become a writer, you must force yourself to write every day, even when you don't feel like a writer. If you want to become an entrepreneur, you must force yourself to think and act like an entrepreneur, even when you feel like an employee. If you want to become wealthy, you must force yourself to make financial decisions like wealthy people make, even when your bank account says otherwise. Your current identity was created by your past actions. Your future identity will be created by your future actions. But those future actions must be forced into existence today, because your current identity will resist every attempt to change. The person you are today is not the person you have to remain tomorrow. But becoming a new person requires you to force yourself to do new things, think new thoughts, make new choices, develop new habits. Transformation is not comfortable. Growth is not easy. Evolution is not automatic. Everything you want to become exists on the other side of forcing yourself to do what the current version of you doesn't want to do. Let me tell you the truth that nobody wants to hear, but everybody needs to understand. Forcing yourself is not a prison. Forcing yourself is freedom. The discipline to force yourself to do what needs to be done when it needs to be done is the highest form of self-respect you can practice. It's the ultimate expression of love for your future self right now, at this very moment. You are living the result of all the times in your past when you either forced yourself or failed to force yourself. Your current bank account reflects all the times you either forced yourself to save money or allowed yourself to spend impulsively. Your current health reflects all the times you either forced yourself to exercise and eat properly or gave in to convenience and comfort. Your current relationships reflect all the times you either forced yourself to be patient, loving, and understanding, or allowed your emotions to control your actions. Every single day, you are creating your future through the choices you make about whether to force yourself or surrender to your immediate impulses. The question is not whether you will live with consequences. You are already living with consequences. The question is whether those consequences will be the result of discipline or the result of neglect. I want to tell you about a man named Robert Chen. 3 years ago, Robert was 58 years old, unemployed, and living in his adult son's basement. He had been laid off from his accounting job after 25 years with the same company. At his age, nobody wanted to hire him. His savings were depleted. His confidence was shattered. His wife had to take a part-time job at a grocery store just to help pay for basic expenses. Robert spent months feeling sorry for himself. He spent months blaming the economy, blaming age discrimination, blaming technology for making his skills obsolete. He spent months waiting for someone to rescue him, for the phone to ring with a job offer, for circumstances to improve on their own. But one morning, Robert woke up and made a decision that would change everything. He decided he was tired of being a victim of his circumstances. He decided he was going to force himself to create a new future, regardless of his age, regardless of his situation, regardless of how impossible it seemed. Robert had always been good with numbers, but he had never considered starting his own business. Fear told him he was too old to be an entrepreneur. Procrastination told him to wait until he found another job. Perfectionism told him he needed business training and startup capital before he could begin. But Robert forced himself to ignore those voices. He forced himself to research what services small businesses in his area needed. He forced himself to create a simple business plan for providing bookkeeping services to local restaurants and retail stores. He forced himself to make his first sales call, even though his hands were trembling and his voice was shaking. The first business owner he approached told him they already had an accountant. The second one said they couldn't afford professional bookkeeping services. The third one didn't even let him finish his presentation before saying no. But Robert forced himself to continue. He forced himself to make 5 sales calls every single day, Monday through Friday, for 3 months straight. Out of the first 100 businesses he approached, 97 said no, but 3 said yes. Those 3 small clients gave him enough income to cover his basic expenses and enough confidence to continue. Robert forced himself to provide exceptional service to those 3 clients. He forced himself to exceed their expectations. He forced himself to ask for referrals. Within 6 months, Robert had 12 clients. Within 1 year, he had 28 clients and had to hire his first employee. Within 2 years, he had moved out of his son's basement and into his own office. Within 3 years, Robert's bookkeeping service was generating more income than his old accounting job ever had. But here's the most important part of Robert's story. The transformation didn't happen because he discovered some hidden talent. It didn't happen because the market conditions improved. It didn't happen because he got lucky. The transformation happened because Robert forced himself to act like a successful business owner before he felt like one, before anyone believed he could become one. Robert forced himself through the discomfort of rejection. He forced himself through the fear of failure. He forced himself through the uncertainty of not knowing if his plan would work. He forced himself to persist when every reasonable person would have quit. And that's exactly what you must do. You must force yourself to act like the person you want to become. Starting right now, today, this very moment. You must force yourself to make the phone calls that terrify you. You must force yourself to have the difficult conversations you've been avoiding. You must force yourself to develop the skills your dreams require. You must force yourself to save the money your future demands. You must force yourself to exercise the discipline your goals need. The life you want will not create itself while you wait for inspiration to strike. The opportunities you need will not appear while you sit in comfort, hoping for change. The person you were born to be will not emerge while you remain trapped in the familiar patterns that have kept you stuck. 20 years from now, you will be somewhere, you will be someone. You will have accomplished something or you will have accomplished nothing. You will have created the life of your dreams or you will be living with the regret of dreams that never became reality. The determining factor will not be your circumstances. The determining factor will not be your background. The determining factor will not be luck or chance or timing. The determining factor will be whether you forced yourself to do what needed to be done, when it needed to be done, regardless of how you felt, regardless of what others thought, regardless of how impossible it seemed. Stop waiting for permission. Stop waiting for perfect conditions. Stop waiting for someone else to believe in you. Stop waiting for tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. Your moment is now. Your time is today. Your opportunity is this very second. Force yourself. Your future is depending on it.